Hey everybody, you know some castles were built for war, others for royalty, but a rare few were built with designs so unusual they kind of defy your expectations. So here's 15 castles with the craziest designs. Number 15, Château du Guédolon, France. Unlike most castles on this list, the Château du Guédolon is not a medieval ruin or a centuries-old stronghold. It is a full-scale medieval castle currently under construction, using only techniques and materials that would have been available in the 13th century. It's located in a remote forest in Burgundy, France. This unusual project is part experiment, part educational tool, and part archaeological research endeavor. Construction began in 1997. It was led by a team of stonemasons, carpenters, blacksmiths, tile makers, and historians who committed to building the castle entirely with medieval tools, materials, and methods. No power tools, no cranes, and no modern cement. Workers used quarried limestone from the nearby site, hand-cut timber from the surrounding forest, and lime mortar mixed on site. Everything from scaffolding to the rope is created as it would have been in the 1200s. The goal of the project is not just to create an authentic structure, but to understand how medieval builders worked, what challenges they faced, and how techniques evolved over time. Historians and archaeologists are on site every day, documenting every decision and learning from the success and mistakes made during construction. Their findings have already influenced interpretations of existing ruins across Europe. Guédolon is being modeled after the architectural style of Philip II of France around the year 1240, with features like a moat, round towers, a drawbridge, a great hall, and defensive walkways. The design is historically grounded, but the process of building it in real time with no shortcuts makes it a living laboratory of sorts for medieval technology. While it is a modern construction, it does belong in this list because of its unusual purpose and its design method. It's the only project of this kind of scale that seeks to recreate a medieval castle from scratch using nothing but 13th century know-how. Though not yet completed, construction is expected to continue on for decades. The chateau has already influenced restoration practices at historical sites. It represents a bridge between the past and present, where every stone laid is both historical reenactment and a scientific investigation. Number 14, Matsumoto Castle. Matsumoto Castle, it's one of Japan's most iconic feudal castles, and its design is particularly unusual by Western standards. While most European castles are constructed of stone and sit on top of hills for defense, Matsumoto Castle is a flatland castle, or what's known as a hirajiro. It's built on a plain rather than an elevation, and it features an intricate system of moats and wooden interiors rather than towering stone walls. It was originally constructed in the 16th century during the Sengoku period. The castle is known as the Crow Castle due to its black exterior. The central keep, or tenshu, is a multi-storied wooden structure with 5 visible stories and a hidden 6th floor inside, designed to confuse enemies during a siege. This complex arrangement of floors, trapdoors, and steep stairs served as defensive purpose in an era of frequent warfare. But what makes it unique is the aesthetic asymmetry and multi-layered design. The main keep is flanked by a smaller turret and additional towers, all interconnected with enclosed corridors and watchtowers, and the style features gables, narrow windows for archers and gunners, and openings for stone-dropping defenses. Despite being a military installation, it has the elegant curving roof lines associated with Japanese temples and palaces. The interior is entirely made of dark wood, with polished plank floors and exposed beams. Soldiers would have occupied the upper levels with defensive stations, observation points, and gun ports still intact. The hidden 6th floor is completely invisible from the outside, and it was used for strategic planning and temporary housing for the lord. Unlike many Japanese castles that were destroyed during the Meiji Restoration or in World War II, Matsumoto survived thanks to the local people who successfully petitioned the government to preserve it in the late 19th century. Today, it's a national treasure of Japan and a major historical site. It attracts visitors who can climb its narrow staircases and see panoramic views of the surrounding mountains. Its survival, flatland setting, and elegant but deceptively defensive design make Matsumoto Castle one of the most unusually and architecturally distinctive fortresses in the world. Number 13, Neuschwanstein Castle, Germany. So yeah, few castles in the world are as instantly recognizable or as architecturally unconventional as the Neuschwanstein Castle, perched high in the Bavarian Alps of southern Germany. It was built in the late 19th century by King Ludwig II of Bavaria. Neuschwanstein defies almost every medieval architectural norm because it wasn't built for defense, power, or governance. It was built as a romantic theatrical homage to fantasy. Construction began in 1869, long after castles had ceased to be militarily useful. Instead of fortifications, Neuschwanstein is a palace disguised as a medieval fortress, drawing on Romanesque, Gothic, and Byzantine influences. King Ludwig, often referred to as the fairy tale king, designed it as a personal retreat and a tribute to the operas of Richard Wagner, whose mythic and heroic themes deeply influenced the king. The castle includes turrets, towers, gables, balconies, and spires, all exaggerated in scale and their intricacy. The outer appearance resembles a storybook ideal of what a knight's castle should look like, despite having no historical basis in any military architecture. Inside, the castle's even more eccentric. Each room is decorated with elaborate murals and themes from Wagner's operas and medieval legends. The throne hall, with its golden mosaics and enormous chandeliers, looks like a Byzantine basilica, even though it was never completed or used for any political purpose. The Singers' Hall is modeled after the Wartburg Castle's equivalent room and was meant for musical performances, though Ludwig rarely entertained any guests. One of the castle's most unusual features, though, is the incorporation of modern technology hidden within that romantic exterior. It had central heating, running water, flushing toilets, and an early telephone system, and even a mechanical dumbwaiter for food delivery. That was kind of unheard of in most other European castles. It was a blend of medieval fantasy and 19th century industrial innovation. Despite Ludwig's grand ambitions, though, Neuschwanstein was never completed. By 1886, the Bavarian government had declared the king insane and removed him from power. He died under mysterious circumstances just days later, and at the time of his death, only about 1/3 of the interior rooms had been finished. Ludwig himself only spent 172 days in the castle. Ironically, the structure he intended as a private escape quickly became a public monument. Just weeks after his death, the castle was open to tourists. Today, it receives over 1.5 million visitors per year, making it one of the most visited castles in the world. That dramatic silhouette has inspired countless adaptations, of course most notably Walt Disney's Sleeping Beauty Castle, which borrowed directly from Neuschwanstein's design. But what sets it apart? It's not just its beauty, it's the unusual purpose. It was never a royal residence in the traditional sense, never a fortress, and never a court. It was a fantasy made real, built by a king more interested in legends than politics. Number 12, Himeji Castle in Japan. Alright, we're going back to Japan. Unlike the isolated beauty of Neuschwanstein, Himeji Castle is both a marvel and a functional military stronghold, yet it achieves its strength through illusion and deception rather than brute force. Located in the Hyogo Prefecture, this castle is widely considered the finest surviving example of prototypical Japanese castle architecture, and it blends form, function, and elegance in a uniquely deceptive design. It was originally constructed in 1333, but the structure we see today took shape in the early 1600s during Japan's feudal Edo period. Known as the White Heron Castle due to its brilliant white plastered walls and elegant silhouette, Himeji appears delicate and refined from a distance. But its design is a masterclass in defensive architecture disguised as beauty. Approaching enemies would face a winding, disorienting series of narrow pathways and sharp turns that spiral inward towards the central keep. These paths are intentionally confusing. Some lead to dead ends, others to hidden firing points or ambush locations. The gates become progressively tighter and more secure as you advance, forcing the attacker into a choke point where they could be picked off from above. The walls and roofs here are also uniquely designed. The white plaster not only provides an amazing appearance, but also acts as a fire retardant. That's a critical feature in a country prone to wooden construction and frequent fires. Roof tiles were coated in copper to resist burning, and the keep itself has numerous arrow slits, stone drop holes, and concealed rooms for defenders. Himeji Castle's preservation, though, is also pretty unusual. It survived multiple threats that destroyed other Japanese castles, including the Meiji Restoration, where many castles were dismantled, the World War II bombings, which devastated nearby areas, and even major multiple earthquakes, including the 1995 Great Hanshin earthquake. In each case, Himeji Castle remained intact with only minor damage. The structure underwent major restorations in the 20th and 21st centuries, and the most recent completed in 2015, ensuring its survival as one of Japan's only original feudal castles still standing. Himeji is deceptive by design. It appears like a bird in flight. It is in fact a deadly fortress built to withstand siege, fire, and confusion. It draws over 2 million people annually, and it stands as an example of how unusual design can be both graceful and lethal. A castle built not just to protect, but to outthink its enemies. Number 11. Castel del Monte. Rising, unexpectedly maybe, from the rolling hills of southern Italy, Castel del Monte is one of the most architecturally unusual castles in Europe. It was built in the 13th century by Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II. It's located in the Apulia region, and it's unlike any other fortification of its time. It's neither traditional military stronghold or a typical royal residence. Instead, it's a highly geometric, mathematically precise octagonal structure, rich in symbolism and still puzzling to historians today. Construction began around 1240 CE, and while the exact purpose of the castle remains uncertain, what sets it apart is its octagonal layout. The design seems more inspired by classical, Islamic, and even esoteric architectural traditions than by practical military engineering. There's no moats, defensive walls, or arrow slits, features expected in a typical medieval fortress. This one was built not on a high hill or near a water source, and it lacks typical defensive features like stables, drawbridges, or even a kitchen. The structure appears more symbolic than functional. Scholars have long debated whether the building was meant to be a hunting lodge, a retreat, an educational center, or even a structure built to express Frederick II's knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, and philosophy. But that symbolism of the octagon may be the key to understanding the design. In medieval thought, the number 8 represented infinity, regeneration, and the connection between the earthly and the divine. Castel del Monte incorporates numerous mathematical alignments. For example, sunlight enters through specific windows at particular times of the year, aligning with solstices and equinoxes, and those features suggest a deeper, possibly cosmological significance. Inside, the structure includes 16 trapezoidal rooms, 8 on each floor, arranged around a central courtyard. The rooms are connected in ways that emphasize geometric harmony rather than practical living space. Frederick II, often called Stupor Mundi, the wonder of the world, was known for his wide-ranging interests in science, philosophy, and cultures outside Europe. His court was a multicultural one and included Christian, Jewish, and Muslim scholars, and Castel del Monte reflects that intellectual spirit. In the centuries following Frederick's death, the castle was used as a prison, a refuge during the plagues, and eventually it was abandoned. Then later it was stripped of its marble and other interior decorations. By the 18th century, it was in disrepair, though the structure remained intact due to its solid construction. In 1996, it was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognized not for its role in military history, but for its exceptional architectural value and enigmatic design. It stands as a singular monument in medieval architecture, a castle without a clear function, but with unmatched symmetry, symbolism, and mathematical precision. It's a riddle in stone, built by one of history's most curious monarchs. Number 10. Predjama Castle. Built into the mouth of a towering cliffside cave, Predjama Castle in southwestern Slovenia is perhaps the most dramatically situated castle in Europe. Located near the town of Postojna, this 13th century structure is wedged into a 120-meter-high vertical rock face, and it blends seamlessly into the limestone landscape. It's part castle, part cavern, part fortress, unlike any other castle on the continent. Predjama, which literally means before the cave, was first constructed in the late 1200s, and then it was significantly expanded in the 16th century. The original structure took advantage of the natural cave opening, building stone walls directly into the cliff face to close off the cavern and create habitable rooms. The castle's most famous resident, Erasm Luger, a 15th century knight and robber baron, is central to its legend. After being excommunicated for murdering a nobleman, Erasm fled to Predjama Castle, where he resisted a siege for over a year. According to historical and archaeological evidence, he used a secret passage leading from the back of the cave to supply the castle with food and water during the blockade. That tunnel connected to the surface high above the castle was nearly impossible for besieging forces to locate. The defenders could sneak out at night, resupply the fortress, and even play psychological tricks on their attackers by throwing fresh cherries over the castle walls in the middle of the siege. Eventually, Erasm was betrayed and killed by a cannonball while in the castle's lavatory. That's an odd but documented end to one of the more colorful figures in Slovenian history. Inside, the rooms are small, narrow, and staggered across multiple vertical levels. It includes a chapel, living quarters, a dungeon, and guard rooms, and much of the structure's charm lies in that uneven, adapted floor plan that follows the irregular surfaces of the rock behind it. Renovations in the 16th century added some Renaissance elements to the upper floors, including better living spaces and wood-paneled rooms, but that medieval character of the lower levels remains intact. Today, Predjama Castle is a popular tourist destination managed by a cave park, and visitors can explore the upper castle rooms as well as guided tours into the cave system. This castle represents the synthesis of human ingenuity and the natural land. It's an unconventional fortress that literally grows out of the rock behind it, full of history, engineering challenges, and, of course, medieval intrigue. Number 9. Eltz Castle, Germany. In the forested valley above the Moselle River, Eltz Castle is one of the few medieval castles in Germany that's never been destroyed. But what makes it unusual isn't just the preservation of it, it's the multi-family construction, vertical layout, and evolution over centuries that turn the castle into a visually complex, almost storybook-like fortress that does not follow typical design rules. The castle dates back to the 12th century, originally constructed by the Eltz family, who still own it today after 33 generations of continuous occupation. But what makes it unique is that it was jointly owned and inhabited by multiple branches of the same family at the same time. As a result, the castle was built in phases and then divided into separate residences within one overall complex, each branch constructing its own sections with towers, stairwells, and facades. The result is an irregular and asymmetrical layout with 8 towers that rise up to 7 stories high and more than 100 rooms, all packed tightly together on narrow rock spurs above the Elsbach River. One of those distinctive features is the medieval wooden gallery system, which connects the rooms on upper floors across different wings of the castles. These galleries, essentially they're just elevated covered walkways, were designed to maintain separation between the family groups while still allowing for movement throughout the compound. Though it was constructed for defense, it was never really fully militarized like many contemporaries. It features turrets and a fortified gate tower, but it was also clearly built for long-term residence. The rooms inside include ornately decorated chambers, Gothic wood carvings, and a treasury of original armor, weapons, and artifacts. One of the highlights there is the Rondendorf kitchen, preserved in its original medieval form, complete with soot-blackened hearths and authentic utensils. Another unusual thing about Eltz Castle is that it survived nearly all of Europe's conflicts, including the 30 Years' War and both World Wars. That isolated location in the hills and the diplomatic skill of the Eltz family helped it avoid destruction, while hundreds of other castles across the Rhineland were razed. It is now open to the public, with guided tours that are available through original family apartments, armories, chapels, and courtyards, and it remains under private ownership, making it one of the few castles in Europe still run by descendants of its original founders. Number 8. The Fortified Church of Birtan, Romania. Now, while not a castle in the traditional European sense, the fortified church of Birtan in Transylvania functions as a castle-like stronghold, and it's among the most architecturally unusual in Eastern Europe. It was built in the late 15th and early 16th centuries by Transylvanian Saxons. Birtan is part of a series of fortified churches found across rural Romania, but it stands out for its triple ring of defensive walls, unique conflict resolution room, and fortified religious structure. Birtan served as both a religious center and a defensive refuge for the local German-speaking Saxon community. In the late medieval period, Ottoman raids and regional conflicts were a constant threat in Transylvania, so villagers turned their churches into defensive bastions. Birtan's solution was to construct a massive Gothic-style Lutheran church on a hilltop then surrounded with layers of fortifications that rival many military castles in size and complexity. The first two defensive walls are equipped with watchtowers, battlements, and fortified gates, and the third wall features a barbican and a covered staircase that leads up the hillside. These concentric rings allowed the villagers to retreat within the walls during sieges, with food storage and living space available inside. The entire complex functioned like a castle, with vertical defense and choke points at entrances. But one unusual feature here is the matrimonial prison, a small room where couples seeking divorce were locked in together for 2 weeks with only one bed, one plate, and one spoon. Remarkably, local tradition claims that only one couple in 3 centuries went through with the separation afterward. This method of conflict resolution, while not violent, is emblematic of the creative and community-centered solutions devised by the people who lived within its walls. The complex remained intact throughout centuries of war, regime changes, and modernization, and after being neglected during the communist era, it was restored in the 1990s, and then it became a UNESCO World Heritage Site in '93, along with 6 other fortified Saxon churches in the region. Today, it's not just a relic of Transylvania's multicultural past, but it's an unusual example of a castle-like structure built around a church where architecture served defense, faith, and social order all at once. Moving on to number 7, the Castle of the Teutonic Order in Malbork, Poland. The Malbork Castle is not only the largest castle in the world by land area, but one of the most unusual in design thanks to its modular layout, its construction from entirely brick, and its origin as the headquarters for a religious military order. Built in stages beginning in 1274 by the Teutonic Knights, this fortress sits on the Lgot River in northern Poland, and it became the most formidable Gothic castle in medieval Europe. Unlike many European castles made from limestone or granite, Malbork is constructed almost entirely of red brick, a material choice determined by the lack of local stone. The architecture exemplifies the brick Gothic style that was adapted for fortification with thick walls, pointed arches, and high towers. Rather than a single cohesive structure, Malbork was designed as a series of 3 separate castles nestled within one another: the High Castle, the Middle Castle, and the Lower, each serving different purposes and increasing in size as you move outwards. The High Castle functioned as the spiritual core of the Teutonic Order, housing the chapel, chapter house, and living quarters for the knights. The Middle Castle included the Grand Master's palace, dining halls, and guest accommodations, while the Lower Castle housed craftsmen, stables, and granaries. But beyond the military function here, it also served as a great seat of governance for the Teutonic state. During the Order's peak in the 14th century, it was more than a fortress. It was a capital city enclosed within walls, complete with water access for trade and transport. The castle changed hands multiple times over the centuries, falling under Polish, Swedish, Prussian, and then German control, and was heavily damaged during World War II, particularly during the Soviet offensive in 1945, and it underwent one of the most extensive restoration projects in Europe throughout the 20th century. In 1997, it was a designated UNESCO World Heritage Site, and its unusual scale, red brick construction, and modular triple castle layout make it one of the most architecturally unique castles in the world, and it kind of blurs the lines between fortress, monastery, and city-state. Number 6. Crac du Chevalier. Located on top of a 650-meter-high hill in western Syria, Crac du Chevalier is one of the best preserved medieval castles, and it stands out for its concentric design, its scale, and its status as a Crusader-era fortress. Originally built by Kurdish forces in the 11th century, it was later rebuilt dramatically and expanded by the Knights Hospitaller, who controlled it from 1142 to 1271. Crac du Chevalier was a product of military engineering at its peak. It was designed not only to resist attack, but to inspire. Its most unusual architectural feature is the concentric defensive layout, which was a revolutionary design for the time, where an inner ring of fortifications is completely enclosed by a larger wall. This allowed defenders to fall back from one layer to the next, which created multiple zones of defense. The outer walls are flanked by massive round towers spaced at regular intervals to eliminate any blind spots. The inner keep is similarly fortified and features a complex system of halls, barracks, and stables, and storage rooms to support a garrison of up to 2,000 soldiers. Crac also contains one of the best examples of a Crusader chapel, with barrel-vaulted ceilings and Gothic-style stonework. Its water supply system, too, composed of hundreds of underground cisterns fed by rainwater collection, ensured that the fortress could withstand long sieges. During its time under Hospitaller control, Krak functioned as a military base, a supply depot, and a symbol of the crusader power in the Levant. It remained in crusader hands until 1271, when it was captured by the forces of Sultan Baybars of the Mamluk Sultanate. Mamluks continued to use the fortress for centuries, making their own modifications. But unlike many crusader sites, Krak wasn't destroyed or abandoned after the crusaders left. It remained in continuous use well into the Ottoman period. It is one of the few castles in the world whose layout directly influenced later fortress design across Europe. Its concentric form, its innovation, and impressive preservation make it an outstanding example of how unusual design choices can become models for centuries of defensive architecture. Number 5. Castell Coch, Wales. Sitting on a wooded hillside just north of Cardiff, Castell Coch looks like a fairy tale fortress plucked from a storybook. But behind this enchanting appearance is one of the most unusual reconstructions of the Victorian era. While its foundations date back to the 13th century, what visitors see today is largely the product of a dramatic 19th century reimagining by architect William Burgess, commissioned by the eccentric and wealthy 3rd Marquess of Bute. The original medieval fortress, built around 1267, was part of a ring of Norman castles designed to control the Welsh valleys. It was eventually destroyed in the 15th century during local uprisings, and the site lay in ruins for centuries. In 1875, the Marquess of Bute, already involved in restoring Cardiff Castle, turned his attention to Castell Coch. What followed was not a conventional restoration, but a complete reinvention. Working closely with Burgess, the Marquess transformed the ruined walls into a fully realized fantasy of high Gothic architecture. Burgess was known for his love of the Middle Ages and applied his signature style, a mix of French Gothic revival, fantasy, and mythological themes, to every inch of the project. The exterior features classic medieval elements, conical roofed towers, arrow loops, and crenellated walls, and a fortified gatehouse. But the real surprise lies within. Inside is a showcase of imaginative symbolic design unlike anything found in a genuine medieval castle. The interiors are lavishly decorated with murals, gilded ceilings, carved woodwork, and stained glass, often with mythological, biblical, or romantic motifs. The most famous room, the ladies' bedroom, has a vaulted ceiling painted with birds, stars, and zodiac signs in a brilliant blend of Victorian symbolism and medieval fantasy. In some ways, it resembles a stage set more than a defensive structure. Its rooms were never intended for serious use. The Marquess and his family rarely stayed there for long, and it had no military or political function. It was a retreat, a decorative monument, and above all, an exercise in imaginative historicism. Though based on medieval foundation, it serves no traditional castle purpose. It's not a ruin, nor is it a restoration to any historically accurate state. Instead, it's an example of how the romanticism of the Victorian era reshaped perceptions of the past. In the world of castles, Castell Coch is a true outlier, a romantic recreation born of artistic imagination rather than necessity. It's an example of how history can be reinterpreted and reshaped through the lens of fantasy and style. Number 4. Hohenzollern Castle. Sitting atop a forested mountain in southwest Germany, Hohenzollern Castle is one of the most visually arresting castles in Europe, thanks to its unusual neo-Gothic style, elevated mountaintop location, and its symbolic role in German identity. Though the site has been fortified since at least the 11th century, the current structure is the third castle built on the site, and the most recent incarnation is anything but medieval. The original fortress was constructed in the early 11th century, destroyed in the 15th century, rebuilt in the 15th century, and then it fell into disrepair. The version that stands today was constructed between 1850 and 1867 under King Frederick William IV of Prussia, who envisioned a romantic, idealized representation of his family's medieval heritage. Rather than restoring the old ruins, he commissioned a complete architectural reimagining that combined elements of symbolism, fantasy, and national pride. The result is an extraordinary blend of Gothic Revival architecture, with turrets, ramparts, pointed arches, and an intricate silhouette that dominates the landscape. Unlike true medieval castles, which evolved for practical defense, this design was intended to impress. It was built more as a monument to dynastic prestige than as a military structure. But that setting, sitting over 800 meters above sea level, it adds to that dramatic and isolated appearance. The long winding approach to the gate is heavily fortified with zigzagging ramparts and watchtowers, but these features are more theatrical than functional, and the design draws on romanticized medieval themes. Inside, the castle's filled with art, stained glass, and historic relics from the House of Hohenzollern, including items belonging to King Frederick the Great and even replicas of the Prussian royal crown. Though it does resemble something from a Wagner opera, Hohenzollern Castle has also witnessed real history. During World War I and II, it was used as a repository for royal treasures and archives. While it never served as a battleground, it's remained symbolically important to the German people. Today, the castle is one of the most popular tourist attractions in Baden-Württemberg and remains a powerful visual emblem of German history and Romanticism. What sets this whole place apart is that it wasn't built for war nor governance, but for memory. It's a purpose-built monument to a family legacy, constructed with technologies and ideals of the 19th century, dressed in medieval clothing. Number 3. Mont Saint-Michel, France. I love this one. Sitting off the coast of Normandy, Mont Saint-Michel is not just a castle, it's a fortified island commune whose construction and surreal setting make it one of the most unusual complexes in the world. At once a monastery, fortress, pilgrimage site, and feudal stronghold, Mont Saint-Michel has served multiple roles for over a millennium. Its structure defies conventional architecture, adapting instead to the shape of a rocky outcrop that's periodically surrounded by the sea. Its origins date back to the 8th century when Aubert, Bishop of Avranches, founded a small sanctuary atop the granite island, and by the 10th century a Benedictine abbey had been established there. As religious prestige grew, so did the need for defense. By the 13th century, the abbey had become heavily fortified, particularly during the Hundred Years' War. At the summit is the abbey church, supported by crypts and chapels, followed by cloisters and monastic buildings below. Surrounding these are medieval walls, turrets, and lookout points. And beneath it all lies the small village, its streets spiraling downward toward the main gate. Everything is built here on a steep incline with no flat terrain anywhere on the island, forcing engineers and builders to adapt each new layer to the contours of the rock. The fortifications themselves are cleverly designed. Defensive towers and arrow loops guard the walls, and the Tour Gabriel and Kingsgate provide strong entry points. The abbey's west facade, perched at the summit, appears to blend into the sky, which is a symbolic feature meant to represent the connection between heaven and earth. But despite the defensibility, Mont Saint-Michel's primary purpose remained spiritual. Monks lived and worked in the upper levels for centuries, maintaining libraries, gardens, and workshops. And during the French Revolution, the abbey was closed and repurposed as a prison, which it remained until 1863. It was declared a historic monument, and shortly after, restoration work continued. Today, it attracts over 3 million visitors annually, and it remains one of the most visited historic sites in France. Of course, it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It is a castle, a monastery, and a marvel of medieval engineering, built skyward from the sea. Number 2. The Alcazar of Segovia, Spain. The Alcazar of Segovia doesn't just sit on a rock, it emerges from it, like the prow of a great stone ship slicing through the sky above the plains of Castile. Few castles in the world are visually as dramatic or architecturally distinctive as this one. It rises from a rocky promontory at the confluence of the Eresma and Clamores rivers. This fortress palace has watched over the city of Segovia for centuries. But what sets it apart from other castles in Europe is the combination of its geological setting, its unusual triangular footprint, and its layered architecture, a structure shaped as much by symbolism and spectacle as by strategy. The origins of the Alcazar are rooted deep in antiquity. Evidence suggests that the site was first occupied by the Romans, who understood the strategic value of its elevated position and built a fortification here during the imperial era. Later, during the Middle Ages, the Visigoths may have used the site as a defensive stronghold, though no surviving structures from these periods remain. When the Moors conquered the Iberian Peninsula in the early 8th century, they likely maintained a fortress at Segovia, though again, little physical evidence survives. The earliest written reference to the Alcazar as a castle comes from the 12th century during the reign of Alfonso VI of Leon and Castile, after the Christian reconquest of that region. The first known Christian construction at the site began under King Alfonso VIII in the late 1100s. From there, the Alcazar would evolve decade after decade, century after century, and grow from a basic stone keep into one of Spain's most recognizable royal symbols. One of the castle's defining features, and unusual features, is its triangular layout. Rather than following the more conventional rectangular or square floor plans of other European castles, this one conforms to the narrow wedge-shaped rock formation on which it sits. This gives the building a sharp, forward-jutting appearance with the pointed edge dominating the valley below, like the tip of a massive ship. The layout wasn't just a response to the geography. It was symbolic too, meant to project power and control. From a distance, the castle appears impenetrable, the cliff sides forming a natural defensive wall that would have made direct assault difficult. At the narrowest end of the triangle is the castle's most iconic feature, the Tower of John II. Completed in the 15th century, this massive rectangular keep is flanked by 12 rounded turrets, giving it an almost fairy tale-like appearance. The tower provided living quarters, a garrison station, and crucially, panoramic visibility over the surrounding country. From the top, the defenders could monitor all access points to the castle, including the steep bridges and winding roads leading up the cliff. The interior of the Alcazar is no less impressive, and it reflects the changing tastes, styles, and functions of the castle over the centuries. Among the coolest spaces is the Hall of the Kings, where wooden friezes run along the upper walls, depicting 52 busts of Castilian monarchs in vivid color and detail. These busts were added in the 16th century to reinforce the Alcazar's status as a symbol of dynastic legitimacy, creating a literal and figurative gallery of power. Another highlight is the throne room, adorned with golden decorations, coffered ceilings, and heraldic motifs. During the reign of the Catholic monarchs, Queen Isabella I of Castile and King Ferdinand II of Aragon, this room served as a key political center. It was within these walls that Isabella prepared to launch the campaign for the reconquest of Granada. From here, many decisions were made that would shape the future of Spain, and indeed the world. The stone construction of the castle, though durable, couldn't protect it from disaster. In 1862, a devastating fire broke out, destroying many of the wooden interior elements, including the elaborate roofs and several wings of the building. Fortunately, many of the priceless furnishings and artworks had already been removed. And though the fire was a significant setback, it didn't diminish the symbolic importance of the castle. The restored Alcazar became a national monument and opened to the public as a museum, housing a collection of armor, manuscripts, and royal artifacts that tell the story of Castile's rise to power. The Alcazar also did remain a working building, hosting official receptions and events. In the 20th and 21st centuries, the Alcazar has come to be seen as not only a symbol of Castilian heritage, but also as a visual icon. It's frequently cited as one of the inspirations for Walt Disney's Cinderella Castle, and its silhouette is instantly recognizable even to those unfamiliar with its history. Yet, unlike many fantasy castles, the Alcazar is rooted in a deep and complex legacy filled with real people, real decisions, and real consequences that shaped Europe and the world. It's not just a castle, it is a historical document in stone, one that has evolved with Spain's political, cultural, and artistic transformations over nearly 1,000 years. Number 1. The Fisherman's Bastion, Hungary. Sitting on Castle Hill in Budapest's Buda district, the Fisherman's Bastion is one of the most visually iconic structures in the country, yet it's not a castle in the traditional sense. Unlike most entries on this list, it was never built for military defense, royal residence, or even siege warfare. Instead, it's a neo-Romanesque fantasy structure designed in the late 19th century to celebrate Hungary's millennium and to provide panoramic views of the city. Construction took place between 1895 and 1902, part of a broader effort to transform Buda Castle Hill into a ceremonial and cultural showcase. The bastion was intended as a decorative structure built on top the medieval walls of the former castle fortification. While parts of the old castle's foundation and bastions were integrated into the project, the Fisherman's Bastion was designed as a commemorative composition, rather than a reconstruction of any historic fortress. Now, the bastion's name comes from the Fishermen's Guild, which was traditionally responsible for defending this section of the city's walls during the Middle Ages. The structure honors their legacy, even if the building itself isn't a medieval creation. Now, what sets it apart is the symbolism and the aesthetic focus here. The bastion features 7 conical towers, each representing one of the 7 Magyar tribes that founded Hungary in the 9th century. The towers are connected by long open-air arcades, stairways, and terraces that are all adorned with neo-Romanesque arches, balustrades, and decorative stone carvings. At the center of the complex stands an equestrian statue of King Stephen I, the first king of Hungary, crowned in the year 1000 CE. The statue is flanked by lions and framed by the bastion's arched walkways, which combines political symbolism with visual beauty. One unique element here is its deliberate non-functionality as a military site. Though it resembles a fortress, it was never meant to be used defensively. Its turrets are hollows and its parapets are purely decorative, and its towers were built for tourists and citizens to enjoy views across the Danube River. The building's white stone and whimsical silhouette have led many to describe it as a fairy tale fortress, and it often appears in film, tourism imagery, and architecture books as a quintessential example of Romantic historicism. Though it was damaged in World War II, it was restored in the post-war period. Today, it's free to visit to most areas, and it remains one of Budapest's most famous attractions. The terraced cafes, the staircases, and viewpoints draw locals and tourists, especially at sunset when the city skyline glows across the river. Instead of defending against invasion, it was designed to celebrate identity, heritage, and beauty. It blends past and present into a symbolic structure with no defensive utility. It looks like a castle, sure, but it's really quite a public monument dressed in fortress clothing, an idealized echo of a medieval past that never quite existed.